I'm going to give a little bit different presentation than some of you have seen at some of the user groups. I know a lot of the times I've attended and people are going into how to build specific technology solutions or a little bit kind of like under the hood on how to do different tasks. I'm going to tell you guys a bit of a story. And that story is going to start at the absolute beginning with who am I? So I'm Gizzelle and I work in sales and I like to click buttons. So that statement usually scares most IT professionals. But today I'm going to tell you how it actually has the potential to create a power platform revolution within your organization and kind of give you some ideas and tips around how you might be able to take advantage of that as well. So everybody has their favorite thing they've ever built, that thing that puts a little bit more twinkle in their eye when they talk about it. And for me, it's this particular flow. And it looks like a spaghetti mess chart right now, but we're going to kind of go through it piece by piece. But this particular thing it took about a year to come to being. And it didn't start out like this. So we're going to walk through the development journey, some of the lessons learned, and why my ability to sell was key to making this actually come to life. So before I got into technology world, I started out selling donuts. I sold apartments. I sold clothes at Nordstrom. And I was very successful at it. I loved the fact that working on commission, the better you were at your job, the more money you made. And that money gave me a sense of accomplishment, like I was actually good at what I was doing. So I did everything that I could to maximize my success and make sure that I had a lot of wins along the way. And some of my secrets to success, other than being an Aries, so we're really competitive normally, were the fact that I love to learn about the things that I'm selling and actually have knowledge around them. So the last company that I worked for became a Microsoft Gold partner. And as a good salesperson does, I was like, okay, great. Now I have to learn cool and exciting things about Microsoft that I can tell my customers about. So I happened to be working from home, sitting on my kitchen counter, and stumbled across this in 2019. The Microsoft Flow online conference. It was being streamed live on YouTube. And I said, why not? Sit in my kitchen counter, popped it up on the TV in the living room, and I was like, I'm going to watch this and check what it's all about. So heard about this thing called Flow, and it was a conference where progressively throughout the day, the topics got more and more complex. And I watched the first couple and I was completely enthralled, and then it was completely over my head. But one of the things that really stuck with me was that they were using an example of when somebody walked by the building that a potential customer was in, that they could automatically get a notification through Teams of open opportunities at that customer. They could get notification of recent news of that organization, or even like the contacts that people are working with within that company, just by walking by the building. And I was like, that is so cool. How come I don't have the ability to do that right now? Like, I want to log into this thing and figure out how it happens. So like a good salesperson does, I went to the next day to my IT department and very much was like, please, can I have it? And, put on the best pretty please face I had, but I was told that we didn't have the skill set to execute those features and for me not to tell my customers about it because we didn't know how to do it. So I was disappointed and went on to the next thing that we were able to sell and execute. So it was a very short-lived begging experience that I had. But then a couple years later, I left that company. And after spending the first year within my new organization, learning the culture, the processes, the products, and so many manual processes, I started wondering about March 2021. I was like, hey, I remember that flow thing that I heard about in the YouTube conference and how cool it was with automatically doing things when things happened. I wonder if I could learn how to do that. So I started searching for information. I started poking around in our systems, learned that we had licensing for it. And I started going back to my source of information, YouTube. and searched for Power Automate. And within 2 days, I had written my first flow. And this is what it looked like. So this was my first flow. I was so excited because we had this a requirement to document contact and information for our customers into our CRM, so our marketing team had access to them. So that meant manually, like I get an email from somebody, I'd go put their contact information in, or I would take an Excel document that a few of us had, and we would enter our contact information to that Excel document and send it to marketing on like a monthly or quarterly basis. And I was really bad at remembering to take the time to enter my contacts into the system. So this first flow was super simple. When an email arrives to my inbox, it checks to see, does the domain match the customer that I'm trying to track? And if yes, automatically create it in a SharePoint list. If no, do nothing. So super, super simple there. But what it did was it gave me the ability to go from tracking dozens of contacts each quarter to tracking hundreds of contacts each quarter. So this little thing that I was able to build in 2 days, first time ever touching Power Automate in my life, already had a significant value to me and to our organization. So I did what all salespeople do at that particular point. I went ahead and said, well, now's the time to sell. So I thought I was the coolest ever, like seriously the coolest ever. And what I built had the potential to change lives and change the world. So I went and told every single person I know about it. And I started saying, you need Power Automate, you need Power Automate, you need to track this contacts, you need to build this flow. It's so cool. Like, look how amazing this is. And showed my peers everything about it. And they came back to me with things like, well, yeah, that's cool, but can you get their first name and last name? Well, yeah, that's cool, but can you track their, like what their company is? Can you track more than one customer? Can it track meetings? Can it put away my laundry? Like asking all of these things all the time. And I really took that as a personal challenge. And I said, I'm going to figure out how to accomplish each and every one of these things, except for the laundry one. And like it ended up leading to more excitement because people would come to me with an idea and then we'd build upon it. And somebody else would come with me an idea and we'd build upon it. So it was really fun to be able to hear from the people that are using these things, what are the challenges that they have and how can we resolve it ourselves without having to go through all the formal bureaucratic processes of putting in like demand requests and different inquiries into different departments to get approvals. We could just take control of our productivity into our own hands. So it was really an exciting time for me. And I took an opportunity to build an ecosystem of flows specific to my workflow and those around me for the part, and it was able to automate the parts of my job I didn't like and allow me to focus on the parts of my job that I did like, the interacting with people part, really. But as word spread, about 3 months in, I was approached about a new role within our organization where they wanted me to take all the things that I automated for myself and automate them for a global team of 200, which was a set of challenges in and of itself. Change management is a whole different topic. But this was also the birth of the most complex flow that I ever built at this particular moment. So, like most sales organizations do, we have prospecting days. So these are global campaigns where everyone is pulled out of their daily activities for the day, and we're just supposed to send emails, set meetings, make phone calls, try to bring in new pipeline. And in order to encourage people to do that, there's points and prizes and activities and costumes and contests. So, but one of the things about it is there's a lot of manual effort that goes into tracking all of those activities and tracking all of those points that are coming in for this special occasion. So the first event that I did with the organization, I'd only been with the company for just about 2 months at the time. You did the event, I performed the activity, and then you entered it into the CRM. So I'd send an email, I'd enter it into a CRM. I'd set a meeting, I'd enter it into a CRM. And because of all of that, it was a giant, giant pain. And a lot of people didn't really do a lot of it because it was so time consumptive to put the activity into the CRM after every single thing that you did. So then the second time the event came up, about 6 months later, I was brilliant idea. I was like, I'm going to perform all the activities, and then I'm going to go into like sent mail folder and get all record of all of them. And then I'm going to take some of my friends that are in support roles that don't have this activity going on, and we're going to go through and manually enter all of them. So we spent the last 2 hours of the day scrambling to try to enter all of these points into the CRM system, and we're not successful, but we thought it was a good approach. But then by the time this third event came through, I was like, wait, we can automate this. Like, we're doing all these things, we're automating the contact records. Like, there's really not a lot of differentiation from that. How can I automate that? So I built 2 flows. The first one here, I call, and it's legitimately the flow name, the send lots of emails flow. So we have the use case where our users need to send custom emails to numerous contacts in a short period of time. So before, they would have to send emails to Outlook contacts one at a time, hi Bob, hi Sally, hi John, whatever, like, great to see you at whatever. And so one at a time emails were going out through Outlook. And then if it was something that was not a customized email, like a template, they would just BCC a bunch of people and send it out. So from a point tracking perspective, since it was a bunch of people on one email, it only counted as 1 point. So nobody wanted to do that. So they were sending one by one. But with this particular flow, what we were able to do is manually trigger a flow with a button push, which if you guys have not seen these flick buttons, incredible IoT buttons, I've even like bedazzled mine. But so you manually trigger the flow, and it pulls a list of email addresses, names, custom content, whatever you need from Excel. And then we do an apply to each, where for each row in Excel, we're able to send an email, whatever email body you want to customize in there, HTML, text, whatever. And then at the end, I have it update the row with a timestamp to show when it was successfully sent. So instead of people, panic button is completely an option. Apparently in the UK, you can actually use them to automate pizza delivery through Domino's as well. They have a Domino's connector, but only in the UK. But so with this flow, it was really great because we went from sending one email at a time to doing all your pre-work, pushing the button, and we found you can send up to 3,000 emails in a day before IT gets angry at you and shuts off your email for the day. So it was really, really, it was a really beneficial process. And so then the next flow that I created was one that tracked all the points, and it was complex. So I put just kind of a summary of the steps in here. But the use case for this was, we needed to track all these activities that were happening, and having the team put them into the system one at a time was not a very beneficial process at all. And with that, I created a particular flow that was based on an Office 365 group's email address. And what it had was, when a new email or meeting arrives to that Office 365 group's email address, we pulled a bunch of information from there. Who was the from, who was the to, who was the subject line, all that different information. And then we were able to add all of that activity as an item within a SharePoint list. And then if it was an email, it got 1 point. If it was a meeting, it got 5 points. You could customize whatever you wanted at that particular point. And then I took that information and also created a Excel-based points leaderboard that it would also take that username variable, look on that Excel, and then take that document or take that username and add the appropriate number of points. So it was really kind of a nice version for everyone, because as long as they remembered to CC or BCC that email address on their activity, all the points were magically tracked for them. So we went from sending one email, tracking it in CRM, setting one meeting, tracking it in CRM, to just magically remembering to CC or BCC an email address, and all the things just magically happened. So that was kind of one of the exciting points. And Fernando, we were on Salesforce is our CRM that we're using. So now I have designed the solution. Now it's time to sell it. And bonus points to anybody who knows what screenshot or what video game this is screenshot from, because it's my all-time favorite video game in the world. And I've been trying to beat it since 1995 and have not been successful, but hopefully I can one day. But so back to the story a little bit. I went back to, I have a couple guests. It is actually Dungeon Master 2, Skullkeep, Legends of Skullkeep. So that is my favorite video game of all time. So if anyone ever plays it, I will sit and watch you play it for hours because it's my favorite. But so again, kind of back to the story, I sold the organizers on the event on the idea of using my flow for this particular global event, and sold the participants that they would benefit from it because they didn't have to manually track those activities any longer. So I'm telling the organizers it's going to be easier for them. I'm telling the users that it's going to be easier for them, selling them all on this amazing experience and how they're going to be able to earn more points. Click a button, 3,000 points. Like, who wouldn't want that, right? So I went through, told everyone about how they're going to benefit from it, and then I prayed that the flow would actually work on the day of the event because there was no real way to test it or user test it or anything that's associated with it. So anybody have any guesses on what happened the day of the event? While I take a sip of water from my amazing bottle. So it worked exactly as I had written it, at least if you thought about it from like the user perspective. But from a development perspective, it was totally a different story. So one of the things that I really found was my first flow that sent the thousands of emails with the click of a button worked great. My second flow with the Office 365 Groups Mail connector could only handle 100 requests every 60 seconds. So when we combined both of those flows together, anytime someone clicked the mass email button, the send lots of emails button, it would make my flow crash. So let alone say this big day where we have everybody participating in this, like I'm freaking out because I'm like, what's going on? So because user experience is everything, this is the process that I went through to handle that. So the first step I did was I froze up and I almost cried because I was like, what is going on? But then I turned off the frozen flow, duplicated it, and turned it on as a new flow, essentially resetting that whole process. I determined the timestamp of when the flow failed, and then the time when I noticed it. And then I manually went through that inbox and added each of those activities for those users to the time period, because I did not want these people to know after I had sold them on this amazing user experience that my system had any challenges at all. So I spent the whole day going crazy, entering all of these activities, making sure that the flows are working, checking the failed runs, checking everything, and making all of this happen so they had an incredible experience. And the experience that I sold them actually came to life. So at that point, if there was a parade in the streets moment for Power Automate, this was it. So even though I was still stuck that day with a bunch of manual work supporting the flow, the winners of the event were claiming their win to automation. People were approaching me wanting to learn more about it. I was being asked to join team calls to talk about Power Automate and talk about how else they can take advantage of it within their organization. So a lot of people were so excited about how easy it made them that we kind of started a bit of a revolution around it. So on my side, I determined that it was time for me to learn and grow so I didn't have to face that in 6 months when it happened again. So I doubled down on actually reading documentation, getting help from Power Automate community. I found some other people within our organization that had also dabbled in Power Automate. We came together and really kind of formed a coalition that we could support each other and really optimizing that flow. So in 6 months, it didn't freeze up again. And of course, because of creativity, I added a bunch of additional features in there to make it even more valuable the next time. So for Track All the Points version 2, we still wanted to solve for that Office 365 Groups Mail connector limitation, but still provide that great user experience. So luckily, I was able to get my hands on a premium connector, which, was super exciting. And we were able to use the HTTP GET function to be able to pull just the data we needed out of that email instead of the entire email. And then that helped with our performance improvement, and it eliminated the limitation of the 100 activities every 60 seconds. And then also we were able to use domain lookups to figure out how to auto tag the companies. The outreach was to auto calculate the number of companies on each outreach activity. So we could really encourage people to collaborate and build community with numerous companies. We were able to auto populate the user country, region, department, and then we were able to connect that to Power BI for a leaderboard that was live-ish. It was updated 8 times a day because I didn't have a premium workspace for that one. But it was really this really nice streamlined experience that got us so much more additional data. The data was extremely normalized. It had a beautiful Power BI board to it. I was impressed. I would literally tear up talking about how beautiful this flow was that I wrote. And it was really nice to be able to have something like that. And so we had the event about 6 months later that we were able to use the second version of the flow. And it was great, except it still had some challenges. And this is that same spaghetti chart of all the different steps that happened. But there's a couple different things that we didn't know, again, until we put it into kind of production, that one, double quotes in subject lines, for one, who puts double quotes in subject lines? But out of 50,000 entries, 4 people put double quotes in their subject lines, and the Power Automate read those double quotes as kind of a JSON script instead, so it messed up and failed those entire flows. So that was a bit of a challenge. I was mad sending emails to people going, don't use double quotes in your subject lines, but about 4 people did, so we had to deal with that. And then also because we weren't able to tie this into our CRM system, we had to have Excel sheets that had our company, domains, everything kind of separate that they were doing a lookup of. So that caused some performance lag. We actually had a couple of the flow runs that ended up taking 2 full days to run. They were successful, but it was great. So it was really nice for me to see that we made such a big improvement, but there's also these things that we want to start working on improving for V3. And we've already solved the double quote issue, which was great, right? So the next thing that we really want to take a look at was, if we watch through this journey, there's a bunch of these small wins. So it's starting with tracking the contacts in the email, starting with adding, the first and last name to those email. So it's going with adding or tracking the meeting activity in the email and just kind of step by step. So this crazy, messy, complex flow that we've gone to, it happened because I took all of these individual little steps to do lots of little individual flows and then just really kind of stitch them together. And there were so many times when I was building the larger one that I was like, oh, I can just build a separate flow that can do this. And in my head, I was like, no, I can't take the easy way out. I have to learn how to integrate this in. I have to learn to make it more streamlined. I can't build a bunch of tiny little flows. Let's make one big one. So there's a lot of times that I would have to take a deep breath, think through the logic of it, and then just kind of take it from there and step forward. And it would and it made a huge difference because we went from a position where if somebody had 500 points in a day, we considered that one of our top performers in these activities. This last event, which happened about a month ago, we had people breaking 3,000 points for the event, which was just huge, the amount of impact we've had. And then that translates into dollars, into pipeline, into excitement, into wins. So it's a really great benefit for all of the users because they don't have that manual work. They're excited about the event now. They have dynamic leaderboard, activity, fun, ease of use for everything. And it's bringing in more activity to the organization. So really kind of fun there. So what I kind of really want to kind of, I guess, close this portion of it with is that Power Automate gave me the platform as a user who experienced a problem to design a solution to solve that problem. but it was my selling skills and experience in that particular role that really drove me to be able to figure out what are the problems I'm trying to solve, convince the organization and other users to take risks on it, pour my heart into it to make sure that that user experience was exactly as I promised it how to be. And then also build a community and a desire for everyone around the organization to want to be part of it and to want to kind of learn about what we're doing here and take some of their own productivity into their own hands. And the nice thing about this is because people are all talking about it and we have a community around it, when I'm bringing ideas to leadership now, they don't have to say, well, do you think people will adopt this? I can say, this is what the people are asking for. And it makes it a really better conversation because the things that are being developed and worked on are the things that the people really want to happen. So it's really nice there. Fernando, you're asking how many days a week was I investing in this? So automation was not really my full-time job. It was kind of a side kind of project. And during the bulk of it, like I would say I would spend maybe 2 hours a day, like doing that big flow I was working on for a couple week period of time. But on average, I would say I spend maybe about an hour a day, like maybe automating something or learning something or building something out. So not really a heavy lift at all. So a few things for everyone to remember. I want you to remember too that every role is a sales role. Every role within an organization has a sales component to it. Whether you're in marketing, whether you're in engineering, whether you're doing, anything, you have to sell somebody on an idea. You have to sell somebody on a concept. So every single role is a sales role, but it does help to have someone with a skill set on that knows how to do it and knows how to do it well to kind of help advocate for what you're trying to do. Users want to learn and they want to be part of the solution. So enable those users with what they need in order to be successful. Like a couple of challenges I ran into were sometimes I'd be working on something and all of a sudden my access to that connector would be shut off, or some sort of license that I need wouldn't be there. And I would freak out because it's like I could solve this business problem if I just had the access to that. So give the users the ability to access what they need so they can be part of the solution. And then also don't let perfect get in the way of good. Like if I would have waited until this automation flow around the point tracking was perfect, I never would have rolled it out because even to this day, it's not perfect. And also anybody can make an impact. Any single person in an organization can write a flow that takes 2 steps and do something to alleviate just a little bit of the manual burden in their lives. So definitely, something to kind of play around with there. And I thank you. This is all my contact information. As of a little bit ago, I was only 5 Twitter followers away from 500. So if anyone can get me over that number, I can brag to my husband later today. But I'm also.
We're wanting to print some things. Gizzelle, it looks like there was a question from Sarah Hamilton. She says, will you share how to use an HTTP request to get email details?
Yeah, so Sarah, I would love to share that with you, but that was one of the components because I don't have admin access to our server. I had to work with one of our server admins to actually program that side into it on it. So in the premium license, there's the HTTP GET, and essentially you write the code within it to connect directly to the mail server, and you can pull whatever component so it can get like the metadata on all of it, like so I created a bunch of different variables for things like, sender, subject line, date, all of those different pieces. And then on the mail server side, they used it to map those particular components that I identified as variables into that. So I would love to share more details, but there's part of it that even I was kind of shut off from a development standpoint. Yeah, sometimes you have to play with the resources that you have in front of you.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
And Casey, have you delved into the world of getting and posting data from MS Graph?
So just recently, I went into MS Graph and I started kind of pulling to see what is available from a content perspective. So one of the things that we looked at was around especially with the Office 365 groups mail connector, because that was in preview when we rolled it out. And so with that particular connector being in preview, there was a limitation that we actually couldn't pull the information on who sent the email. That wasn't one of the available attributes within that connector. So we actually had people from the Microsoft community and everyone, we were all troubleshooting through all of it going, how do we identify who the sender of this email is? And so we were pulling up Microsoft Graph to see if we could even identify it within that perspective, and it just wasn't an option. So ultimately, what we ended up doing was transferring from the Office 365 Groups mail connector. For that V2, we went to just the straight Office 365 Outlook connector instead, because it was a lot more fully baked for some of those particular elements. So that, again, those are just one of the things that we learned along the way, and we used Graph as kind of a troubleshooting piece along the way to see what was available within those sources. And Fernando, I do play an instrument, and I do also sing. So
I think Fernando's asking if you are in sales or development IT now.
So I'm still on the sales side. So I actually have a quota tied to me as a individual. So it's really interesting because I recently was talking with one of the organizations that I help support within the company from a sales perspective. And the person over there recently got into a new role and was saying like, hey, like my new role, they're asking me to do all of this stuff. They're asking me to, from a sales perspective, to track this, track what types of meetings I'm having, track, what our notes are, track what our next steps are, track org charts, track all this stuff. And she's like, you must be asked to do that same stuff too, but it's like, it's such a burden. Like I can't actually go spend time with my customers because I have to do all of this administration work. And I was like, oh yeah, that's what Power Automate did for me. And she's like, what? And I was like, I automated all of that part of my job. So with that, I can actually go sell and I can actually go have fun. Like I used to do like cocktail drink videos for my partners of like making up funny things, or I do songs for them. I took like Disney princess songs and rewrote all the lyrics about our products so that we get stuck in their head, like doing like fun things like that all the time, because that's what really built the relationship and got them excited about the products and got them to really want to do more about it. If I was sitting behind the computer and tracking things manually all the time, that wouldn't be that wouldn't be beneficial to the organization or to what I'm trying to do from a sales perspective. So there's been a lot of times where some of our departments like IT or operations or whatever, just like, well, come work for our department. Like the stuff you're doing belongs in our department. And for me, I really feel like if I was there, like I'm a front of house person, and I feel like if I was in IT or operations or something, that's a little bit more of a back of house role. And like I feel like with 6 months or so, like I would love it, I'd be great at it, but within about 6 months or so, I'd get bored and I'd miss the interactions with people and I'd miss the storytelling and I'd miss the evangelization side as well from an external perspective. So I don't know where I don't know where it'll all end up in the long term, but it's definitely a fun adventure for sure. And I'm learning a lot about myself along the way too. So
how much did you have any trouble getting IT to support you with Power Apps, especially in the beginning?
So actually no, and I would say that we have a large organization, so a very large IT organization that was there. And one of the things that I always think is super important is to be friends with the people that are around you in your support organizations. And so a lot of times, like I would get on the call with them and I'd be talking about stuff and like, hey, this is a thing I'm trying to learn, or this, well, hey, have you talked to this person? This person knows a lot about that. Or hey, have you talked to this person? And I think one of the best pieces of advice I ever saw one time was on Twitter. They said that try to make friends with people that are at least 2 orgs or more away from you on the org chart. So I've taken that to heart. And like I literally reached out to that person on Twitter. I'm like, I'm more than 2 orgs away from you. Can we be friends? And so really get to know like what they do, and you learn so much from them. So I actually was able to find people within our organization that also have expertise around this, that they wouldn't do it for me, but if I got stuck, they would be there as a resource to kind of help out. So that was one of the, and like there would be a lot of times where I would like I'd be working on something. I'm like, I'm going to reach out to him. And I'm like, no, because he's going to say, did I Google it? He's going to say this, he's going to say this. I'm like, I have to try it myself before I reach out. And so like, that's kind of like my lifeline there. And then there's also some people within the organization too, like I said, that are, that like we're starting to learn together and we're starting to develop things together and we're starting to brainstorm together. And like, for example, Vanessa on this call, she and I were on something with Power BI yesterday, and we didn't know how to do it. And we're sitting there, we're like, how do we do it? How do we do it? And then I was like, let's get off this Zoom bridge. Give me 10 minutes. I'll go teach myself how to do it and we'll come back and figure it out. And literally like 10 minutes later, I messaged her, I'm like, I figured it out. And so it's one of those things where like we encourage and we inspire each other to kind of expand our own skill sets a little bit more too.
Neat. Yeah. Yeah. I wish there were more citizens like you at my place. I'm on the IT side, but I'll tell people I won't do it for you, but if you need help, I will help you do it to get
Exactly.
past it.
And I'm not going to say, and I'm not going to say that every experience that I've had with IT is perfect and everybody is super supportive of it, because there are some people that are like, well, this is the systems that we're supposed to use, or this is the process that we're supposed to use, or this is the request thing we're supposed to use. And for me, like I'm a transformational agent, I guess, by nature. And like whenever anyone says, well, this is how we've done it, I'm like, okay, I'm done listening to you, like, whatever. But it's actually really interesting and kind of off topic, but there's a group out of Europe that is running workshops for leaders and CEOs called unbossing workshops. And they have this whole concept where you essentially completely flatten an org and say, no hierarchy, no managers, no approvals, no anything. People just work together to do the right thing and provide the value that they provide to the world, and really like don't have to go through all the layers of bureaucracy in order to get anything done. And they're working with some really big name Fortune 100 companies to come in and say like, let's get rid of these like managerial hierarchies, change the culture so people can bring their full value of themselves to the organization and really kind of like do all the things that are right to do for the company.
Question. So as someone who's had a sales role for a long time and had other roles within an organization, I think, it's important to have partners, but one of the hardest pieces sometimes, and you have a very compelling use case and great presentation, great energy, love it. But a lot of times you actually have to get people to get on board because they would need to do things differently. It would require some time commitment, some training. So what are some of the, I guess, successful strategies that you found to get people excited, and also even, in situations where it might not be very obvious, and also, kind of like get the support from the higher level management to get the go ahead from them?
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of the things that I really look at, and I think that's kind of where the sales skills that I have are pretty beneficial from a lot of this perspective, is really identifying what is the problem, what is the solution that we're proposing to it, and then what is the benefit to the particular users. Because if we can come to them and clearly articulate those particular pieces, it clicks with them a little bit more. So we're like, you have a challenge with this. This is a way we can solve it. And this is why it's going to be amazing and incredible for you. So establishing that, I think, with the leadership and the stakeholders, so they're like, okay, we're bought into it. But then getting the adoption around it. And this is one of my favorite things to do because I'm a performer by nature. So I think of all of these different things as like events. So if we have like this campaign, like this prospecting day, I'm like, what do I want that prospecting day to look like? What feeling do I want people to have? What results do I want people to have? And work my way kind of backwards from there. So if you think about it from like a stage performance, like if you're putting on a musical, right? You know in your mind, what kind of costumes do we want? What kind of set do we want? What kind of experience do we want? What kind of songs and everything do we want? Then we start designing the costumes, we start designing the material, designing the sets, practicing the lines, doing all of those different pieces. And then you sell tickets and you advertise it and you get those butts in the seat in order to actually come and experience the show. So for like our prospecting day, for example, I wanted it to have a certain outcome. I wanted people to use the activities and you get it. So I actually did a 2-week campaign where I did daily videos with guest stars on it every single day. I was putting out daily videos that I was like, and remember, CC or BCC this on here, and remember, and see this person's great results, and like, what kind of best practices do we have from here? And I was putting in like fun music videos, and I was doing things and really hyping it up to get people excited about it, to get that momentum going. And we ended up for that event beating our goal that was set by the organization by 300%. Because I'd communicated for 2 weeks solid with videos, with messages, with SharePoint pages, with FAQs, with everything to really identify to everybody, this is exactly what you need to be successful, and make sure that it's all front of mind. So if you asked anybody in the company, what am I supposed to do this day? They would be able to clearly articulate that because they've heard it over and over and over again. So I think a lot of organizations, what I've seen is they're like, well, we have this new thing. Go tell the leaders and then they'll tell their teams. Well, that's an approach you can take, but a lot of times, a lot of the leaders are bogged down with other things. There's escalations, there's whatever. We miss the different deadlines. They're not able to articulate it as clearly, do anything. So I find a lot of times just taking the message straight from the source and communicating as much as possible to the people that are going to be affected and get their buy-in and participation and understanding is really important.
So Gizzelle, this is like, I mean, it was amazing. I witnessed this, and it was just an amazing thing that Gizzelle did. Honestly, it was. So now that you do this, now you know we were able to have people use it. They were amazed by it. What are your plans for taking it to the next level in the next 6 months? Do you have any ideas of what you want to do with it and how to get there?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that some of them right now, like we've got to a solid point where I want to be able to just tweak a few different things that we have. And I think some of it is like doing the Excel lookup versus looking up the data straight in our CRM. Like I would love to be able to open the connector between Power Platform and our CRM to be able to get that stuff a little bit more accurate. And then also it would be great because we could blend our data sets, blend our reporting, get a lot more kind of accuracy around all of that. So that's one of the pieces, is just to kind of improve that performance and streamline. And I think that that would be really great. But also we've had such good results that how are we going to beat that next time, right? And like, how are we going to get better from that and really work on it? And what's the quality and what's the metrics on all of it? Because there's all this like prospecting activity, but it's like, well, what does that turn into from pipeline? What does that turn into closed business? Like, how is that actually benefiting our organization? And do we need to adjust our strategy from that perspective? So on that particular flow, those are the pieces I'm looking at, as more kind of fine tuning some of those and more process procedure. But then now I'm also building out some additional flows within the organization for some other use cases that are really kind of helping with like KPIs and measurements and talking to like what are our goals as an organization, and do we have reporting systems in order to be able to kind of really look at that? And you know, it's been really nice too, because like with Power BI, like our organization has not standardized on Power BI from a sales perspective, but because I know how to use Power BI, I can go through and build out mock-ups and then share them with our like Tableau team and say, hey, this is how I want it to work, or these are the visualizations, or these are the things. So I have a lot more say in what we're going to be able to actually do to help our people.
It's great. From salesperson to salesperson, it is tough, and data, especially working with CRMs, you know, I would be really interested to hear what it's like working with Power Platform tools and Salesforce, because a lot of it's some oil and water. I know a lot of the connectors really suck. So whatever you're doing to get around that, or maybe if one day Microsoft and Salesforce just, you know, call truce.
Yeah,
Which I don't know if that's
it's actually. It's hilarious, because when I got the premium connector, the first thing that I did was try to connect to Salesforce. I'm like, this is going to be revolutionary because there's so many things I want to do in Salesforce. Even though I have the connector open on this Power Platform side, the Salesforce side, they like shut me down. There was like a brick wall, like I couldn't connect to it. So I was a little disappointed there. So I haven't been able to test it, but we do have a team within our organization that is doing some test work on it to see if we can get that connector to work a little bit more effectively, which I'm really excited about. But in the meantime, I've started doing some workarounds, and this is where Power Automate is incredible. So for example, there's Salesforce will send out email notifications sometimes to some people for certain activities, right? So we had a group of people that wanted to get those notifications distributed to them and routed to the right person. So what I was actually able to do is find out who gets that email notification when that thing happens. I was able to get that email forwarded to me, and then I use Power Automate to parse out the pieces from it and send a Teams notification to the appropriate people that needed it. So I literally just I counted how many characters. I'm like, okay, 5,207 characters in, this starts, and I literally wrote all this parsing out to pull that out and be able to build that notification separately. So when this happens in Salesforce, they get a notification in Teams, but it took me 2 days of parsing to be able to build that one out. So
thanks everybody for joining us again, whether you're in Portland or outside. And thank you, Gizzelle.